Hi, and welcome to Heaven. This is Raquel Alves
Julia Kibilda.
and today we actually have probably our most gossipy episodes so far. We're going to be talking about reality dating shows.
Oh, my favorite. Okay, whoever doesn't know me, I am a massive fan of trash TV. It's like my relaxation, my safe space to switch off my brain and just
And watch hot people fighting for one another.
exactly. But I still have a lot of thoughts, which is why this episode is coming out. Because, oh boy, do we need to discuss the mess that is going on in those shows.
Yeah, we're mostly going to be focusing on the misogyny that's often represented and shown sometimes quite bluntly through contestants in the show. And also a bit about what's the paper or the role of these shows when broadcasting these issues. So yeah, today I'm drinking red wine. I've actually been drinking red wine for an hour before we started because today is
Right.
it's a tough day. But yeah, I'm drinking a Pinot Noir from Douro, Portugal.
That's nice. I am drinking black tea because I am supposed to go out today, and if I start drinking now, I will show up to my date very wasted, so that's probably not a good idea.
I actually think that that would be a great idea, but each to their own, I guess.
Well, TBC, maybe midway through, I will like make myself some gin and tonic or something. Anyways, I don't even know where to start because there's like so many dating shows. Okay, actually, maybe let's start with Love is Blind because you know what? The new season just came out, and I think Love is Blind is like the most ridiculous show out of all of them, like the principle of it.
Really? Why?
I feel like it's because the idea that these people talk to each other for like 3 weeks in those pods without seeing each other, and they have like this very limited pool of people. I think there is around 10 people of each gender in every season. And,
Mhm.
it's only just 3 weeks. And on one hand, when you think about it, it's quite similar to like, I don't know, like online dating on messaging when, you
Yeah.
talk to someone for like an extended period of time. The difference though is that when you talk about with someone for 3 weeks on a dating app, you don't declare love to them. You don't propose to them, which is the principles of Love is Blind. Like at the end of the plot stage, the guys have to propose to the women. And
Mhm.
the thing is that these people really do seem to treat it very, very seriously. For those of you who don't know, after that, there is like another, I think, 3 or 4 weeks where the couples spend time together. And at the end of that process, there is an actual wedding, and they have to say yes or no at the altar, whether they want to stay together or not. And now I didn't know that before, but that actually is a proper actual wedding. Like it's legally binding. It's not just for the purpose of the show. It is an actual commitment that those people are making. And that just seems so bizarre to me because I feel like the whole principle of the show often makes the couples break up because they just rush it so quickly and they're so overwhelmed about the prospect of marriage. And rightfully so, because who the fuck in their sane mind marries someone after like 3 months of dating them? And
Yeah.
they're so overwhelmed and they're not able to work on like any of these issues that they face. And then they end up breaking up at the altar, which is such a massive thing because it's in front of their whole families, in front of the camera crew, everyone else, that they're never able, almost never able to come back together and actually say, oh, let's just take it slow and continue this relationship, but not worry about the marriage part of it.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. I found it to be the formula was actually quite similar to Married at First Sight, which
Mm.
has like a lot of seasons and different variations from country to country.
Yeah.
My fave personally is Married at First Sight Australia, just saying.
I've
Best.
actually never seen it.
But it's very similar. I think the only difference is the initial part. So while Love is Blind, they still talk to one another, they just don't know who they are. And you kind of choose who you want to propose, even though
Yeah.
it's very a superficial choice. In Married at First Sight, you don't know who the person you're going to marry to, so you meet them at the altar for the first time. But the difference is, as you're saying, is that like the marriage in Married at First Sight is not an actual
Yeah.
marriage, contract-wise. But there's the formula of like, honeymoon and then, meet parents, meet like where the other person lives, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then the actual marriage, then you say, I do, I don't at the end. It's actually quite similar. Something that's actually I found was very interesting about Love is Blind is that it was created to be a quote unquote antithesis of dating apps
Yeah.
because and I find that super, super interesting because in a way it makes sense that you would start seeing shows like that. I mean, as
Yeah,
we said in our very first episode, if you like going to check out when we went a bit on depth on it, like the youth mostly is very disenchanted with dating apps and it led us to be very superficial in how we connect with one another, and it's very visually based choices. And I think Love is Blind was trying to do is like, can you make a connection without actually looking at the person
yeah,
first? However, they actually end up following a lot of what they actually critique on dating apps into the show.
totally.
So for example, they are like at the beginning when in the pods like
Yeah.
stage when they're just like meeting through those gigantic capsules. Props to the production, by the way, on that.
I know. I
They,
always find it so cool. Like I would love to go into one to see
just
how
to
it
try,
actually
just to
looks like.
try.
Maybe that's how I'll find my future husband, Maybe I should just sign up to Love is Blind. Who knows?
Maybe. So some of the things that like all criticize on dating apps is kind of what happens in the show. So at first they are serial dating, so they're dating several people and
Exactly.
they take a shot in this person, but then this person is like, oh no, I'm seeing someone else. And you're like, well, let me go to my second option and make her think that it was actually my first option. So you're like
Exactly.
playing this game, right? Guys a lot are very interested in appearances too. So
Yeah,
they
they
even
often ask how you look like.
look
And
like exactly.
speaking of that, in this season, there was actually the exact same situation that you're describing now in the new season. Spoiler alert, but basically there is a guy and he's talking to two other women who are both very interested in him. And basically he's talking to one, but then he finds out that she has a child and that puts him off a lot. And she's like super hot and great. They get along super well. But basically that news just completely switches him by like 180 degrees and he starts focusing more on the other girl who they don't have that deep of conversations really. They're just, having fun in a sense in the pods for like talking, but you kind of compare it to like a more casual superficial relationship, I would say. And then she mentions that a lot of people compare her appearances to Megan Fox.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's when he's like sold on her, and then they meet. And it actually turns out he's not that attracted to her at all because, well, she does not look like Megan Fox. She's an attractive woman, but actively, I think people agree that the other one who was talking to was actually way more attractive, but only by hearing that the other one looks like Megan Fox, he made his decision in a sense. And I
yeah.
saw online a lot of people criticize the girl instead of him that she led him on, telling him she looks like Megan Fox. Whereas the blame isn't him because he chose to make his decision based on that comment. That's what kind of tipped him over the edge over the other girl. And if he actually was like committed to the experiment and the way that it worked, he maybe would have realized that the other woman was more of a fit for him in a sense, personality wise.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Oh, I felt so awkward when they actually met and when he was looking at her and making comments on her appearance right away. And I'm like, dude, that's your fucking wife, yo. Like
I
now. It
know.
was really awkward. First, you should never try to like incite how you look like because even if you put a celebrity, it doesn't matter how
Never the
attractive you
same.
are. Yeah, it doesn't matter how attractive you are, you're always gonna like fall behind
Exactly.
because you expect something, you get something else, even if there's
But
something else that's not so good.
it's also always different in real life because even on dating apps, you see pictures of people, but at the end of the day, when you meet them in real life, it's always different. It's never like the same person that you see in the pictures. At least that's my impression.
That's the point. You can't even see the person in this experiment, and yet you based on your decision on appearances only, pretty much. Like your deal breaker between one or the other was because of the most superficial comment ever, which is
Yeah.
goes completely against what the show is about.
Exactly, exactly. And they often ask them like, oh, like, are you petite? Are you bigger? What's your preference? And I don't know, I just find it so off-putting because then on the other hand, you can see that women who have a very different approach, what they mostly ask about are questions that are based on like their own insecurities. So rather than asking the guys how they look like, they would ask them what is their preference.
Oh God.
So you can clearly see that difference because they're kind of trying to see like, oh, am I going to be the right fit for that person rather than is that person going to be the right fit for me? Or, they would focus on more like important things such as like, I don't know, like body weight insecurities,
Oh my
race,
God.
like
Yes.
race For example, there is a lot of women who, try to get a sense of whether the guy, used to date black girls or white girls, what's their preference, because they don't want to be like objectified only based on their race, or like think that the guy chose them only because they're a certain race. And
Yeah,
I find it quite
there was
interesting.
there was this guy who literally would ask their weight of like, could I lift you up? And I was like,
Oh, he was
that's
the
like a
most
word.
toxic guy ever.
And
I
that same guy, he was like super excited when he saw the one he proposed to and paired with. And then literally a week after, already into the honeymoon, when he goes speak to the other guys, like, oh, I don't feel attracted to her at all. And I'm like,
He was the
what the
worst.
heck?
And he made such bad comments about his appearance. He literally told her, like, oh, you're like a 7 out of 10.
Oh my God.
You
I can.
chose to marry that person. Like, that's just insane to me. That's like what you can clearly see. Those very superficial behaviors really resurface, especially in men. There have been some instances of women doing the same. So I'm not going to say it's
Yeah.
completely one-sided, but you can clearly see that it's mostly men trying to guess, like playfully figure out and like get out that appearance information from the women in the talking stage. And then very often they would lie to them about whether they're attracted to them or not when they see them. And then you can see them like off camera talking to the like crew that
Yeah, the
like
confession
they're
booth.
not attracted to them at all. And usually, I'm sorry, but usually they're the ones who are super bad looking. Like, I'm sorry, but look at yourself. Look in the mirror. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, this woman is literally beautiful, and you're there looking like a fucking turtle, and you have the audacity to make these kind of comments. It just annoys me so.
I don't know if this is like a controversial opinion or if it's rude, but if it's rude, I don't care. I mean, we don't have that many listeners, have we? So if you're not hot, you don't have the right to demand hotness from someone else. There, I
Exactly.
said it. I said it. I'm sorry. If you cannot like be super demanding on someone else's appearance if you yourself are not extremely hot. Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah, and
you
like if
can't.
you don't take care of yourself and whatever, like leave your dirty underwear everywhere, for fuck's sake. And yeah, speaking of that, it's very funny to me how after that talking stage and honeymoon stage, they kind of start to know each other and they realize they actually secretly hate each other and they're not compatible with each other at all. Because that's when all the true faces come out. And let me tell you, the men get absolutely fucking unhinged. They turn into the biggest gaslighters. They literally say such awful comments to the women and they try to blame everything on them and saying that they are the ones who are overreactive, that they are not giving them space, etc., etc. And they're trying to mold the women into their vision of what they were thinking they were getting when they were in the pods because they don't like the real thing. And that's just so horrible to me. And it's so funny when they meet the other contestants. So they meet their second choices that they didn't end up going with, and they start to flirt with them in front of the actual fiancés.
And that happens almost in every single season. And it's just,
Every season.
it's made on purpose for sure.
Every season. That's why, for me, this show obviously doesn't work because these people obviously have no fucking clue who they're meeting with. They have no fucking clue who they're proposing to. You've been talking to someone for 3 weeks. So what? You haven't seen them interact with others. You don't know if they're like, I don't know, rude to waiters, if they're like super aggressive in terms of their body language. You have no idea of knowing that. Oh my God, there was this one guy, I think it was like second or third season, and he would get super, super aggravated when they had any arguments. So the couple would fight all the time, and he would throw shit at her. He would scream. I was scared for the girl. I was like, this is not okay. Like, this is abusive, like proper abusive behavior. And how do these people who produce the show let that happen? It shouldn't be happening. The whole show is so flawed. I don't get how people think that could actually work.
I think the whole aspect of the show, with all of these stages, you talk, you propose, you go on a honeymoon, you go meet each other's houses, meet the parents,
Yeah.
marry, off, boom. I think also contributes to the shallowness of it all
Yes.
because, of course, it's just a show, but it is also paradoxical to say we want to create more meaningful connections when you run down all these stages deemed as necessary incredibly fast. and you don't have enough time to actually develop that relationship, or develop even not even a relationship, but just getting to know the other person deeply. No, you kind of go through all these stages. This is all you need to know to get married, and then boom. And that's
Yeah,
just not how it works.
exactly. That's like the predominant reason why the show doesn't work, because the pressure for these people to follow through and actually go through with the wedding in the end is so high that they very often fail to like notice the obvious red flags in their partners. And in a sense, it actually perpetuates all of their previous like relationship patterns. For example, like the women falling for the abusive man and kind of letting them like gaslight them, and just for that idea of being engaged to someone and being in a relationship and following through because of all of the societal pressures, and in this case like the producers and the show's pressures of the audience waiting on your wedding, and your family's waiting on your wedding as well. And to me that's just really bad, because it perpetuates this idea that you have to like stick around in that relationship and you have to be grateful for what you have because you're not alone, but you are much more often better off alone than with someone who's abusive and incompatible with you.
I
So
think that's also like one of the aspects that, because it is a show, you kind of have to stay unless you leave the show. And that's like the same issue when we talk later on with Love Island. So basically, if you decide not to stay in the relationship, you're not part of the show anymore. And you went there also to be part of the show.
yeah,
So it's always a bit impossible to be quite truthful in those relationships when the whole point is to have a show out of them. And
yeah,
you shouldn't like back off as soon as something goes wrong. But I think sometimes it is also extended to the extreme of you're clearly being abused and gaslighted and all these other issues in your relationship, and you are told to stick around to make the relationship work. Like it's kind of what we hear like a lot of times.
yeah,
And the other problem I would say with Love is Blind is that it still perpetuates a lot of these traditional roles on
totally.
contemporary intimate relationships. So even the fact that it's the guy who has to propose, like he's the one who's going to be making the decision, really.
Yeah,
So
I
of
mean,
course the woman can say no, but usually it's the guy who is going to go propose.
yeah,
So in a way, since they're the ones who are choosing, he also gives them this quote unquote valid position to critique the women that they chose. It's like, oh, I choose you based on this and that, and you're like not fulfilling it, basically.
yeah,
And I really feel that it's putting men in that position, that traditional roles obviously benefits them, that facilitate all these sexist attitudes towards women.
yeah.
And it also, the fact that like the producers keep enabling this to happen also gives men more confidence to say so. Like, I'm not going to get anything bad out of this, right? So I'm just going to do whatever I want. Of
But
course, they
this
don't think exactly in this way, but it's like the behavior that passes on.
Yeah, this show totally does that. And then, especially also later on when they're in their actual lives and jobs and they decide in whose apartment to live in, what each person is gonna do. And often it is, most of the time, it is the women who have to make the compromise of switching their job or whatever. They are the ones who are gonna do that and compromising so that the man can kind of keep carrying on with his life as it was before the show, in a sense. And
Mhm.
very often they also talk about kids, and the men are very keen on having the women have kids in a sense, which I don't know, it's also weird. In this season, there is this guy who refused to have sex with a woman because she wasn't on contraception. Heard about condoms?
Yeah, I know.
Like, and he was literally like declining her sex just because she wasn't on the pill. And she was like, I don't want to be on a pill because it's bad for my body. It's like hormone.
Yeah,
And he was like, oh, then I don't want to have sex with you because I'm scared you're gonna get pregnant. And I was like, have you heard about different
but
types
like
of contraception? Like, do you sleep around with no condom with random people you meet in a bar? That's ugh.
besides, like the most effective contraception still up to this day is the condom.
Exactly. And it also prevents you from like getting an STD and like all other things. It's not only about having babies. There's so many worse things that can happen to you through sex than a baby.
Well, yeah, literally. I am very against using the pill personally, because of the whole hormonal issue of it. Like I don't want to be altering my hormones on a daily basis because when you take the pill, you cannot take just one time. You have to be taking it all in order to like actually have effect. So even if you're not
Yeah,
having
exactly.
sex constantly, you have to keep taking it in order to keep your hormonal system like rather
Yeah,
consistent.
exactly. And then when you decide to come off it, it absolutely messes up your body. And some women take years to recover from them, which is just insane. Yeah, it kind of like naturally forces these people into like the very stereotypical gender roles. And also when the families talk with each other, they're always like focusing on like, oh, when are you guys gonna have kids?
Yeah.
What's the woman gonna do? Blah, blah. There's always so much emphasis on that. But yeah, for me, it's mostly the toxic behavior that is exhibited through the men kind of walking all over the women and telling them that they're the ones who are like, having issues and that having issues is wrong and you shouldn't have any issues with me because I'm so great and so amazing. And it's only you who's making problems. And it's you who's making this relationship not work because you're having issues all the time. And that's what happens every single season. And it's just really upsetting, to be honest. Every season, something new comes up, and I'm like, them, these people are like total danger.
Mhm. Yeah, another aspect I would say, some people say like the first season was kind of all right, and then everything went off rails a little bit from that. And I think one of the reasons I would say is that because it was the first season, it's an unknown show, people went with a bit more intentions to it. So I think in the beginning, the show was for people who really wanted to settle down. So people who were interested in marrying, choosing a partner for life, starting a family, they all already had everything in common. It was not just about finding a relationship. It was really about like setting up for life. And that's why the whole marriage part also comes with the show. And I think people were a bit more genuine with their feelings and intentions because it's a show that's not known. It blew up from the first season, and everyone who comes after already knows what happened and already has a fame attached to it. So you have more people who come maybe perhaps more for the fame than actually for the love.
Yeah, and totally. Like the second season was absolutely unhinged. I think that was like one of the most bizarre seasons of the whole show. I
Mm.
think the people that were there were just fucking insane. Anyways, but yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's the case with most of these shows nowadays. Obviously, everyone knows the formats and people predominantly go there to seek fame.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
the only good sort of aspect to Love is Blind nowadays, although it's not ideal yet, but I think it's the most body diverse
Mm.
show out
Oh,
of all of them because it doesn't only have like very stereotypically hot people in it.
mm.
So it is kind of a more accurate representation of the society. There's still no plus size people most of the time, but on average, yeah, on average, it's, the most
Yeah.
diverse one of the ones I've seen.
The final thing I would like to say about Love is Blind is that, of course, it's reality TV and there's a lot of things that are unseen by us. And, we have, in a sense, constructed narratives within it for us to follow along. So, of course, a lot of the conflicts and controversies that happen are made on purpose as plot devices in a way to like keep on going. And we have this one couple who is the one that's always great from the start until the end. We have the love triangles from, the first and second choice start together in the honeymoon, all that kind of stuff. From this latest season that's going on now, I actually really want to talk about this guy called Matthew. Do you remember him? With
Yeah,
glasses, the finance bro.
yeah,
Our finance bro called Matthew is actually quite an interesting contestant because I think he's kind of gonna make a comeback at some point on the honeymoon phase if he hasn't already, because he kind of went in really. I don't think he came in to like find love. I cannot tell what he actually comes from. Again, I'm also seeing an edited version of the guy, but he kind of attempted to create his own narrative for himself, like within the show. Of course, the producers kind of catch him on, but he first plays this like very ruthless kind of person towards
yeah.
all the women with all those like set up questions and then leaving
Yeah,
in
then he
the middle.
victimizes himself and says he has like
Exactly.
autism, troubled past, blah blah blah.
And he catch two girls with that story. So he played the underdog to like win over the producers. So he stays in the show and win two options of girls
Yeah,
to
telling
good.
them the exact same stories and the exact same phrases, like word by word, which is insane to me.
It's
Was
insane.
that
He
was
was
crazy.
Yeah, it was very meticulous, and he was literally playing a game. He played a game to
He
win,
did.
and that's literally how dating apps work. You're saying the exact same things. You're playing with two girls, for example. Why? To get the best shot. One of them is going to say yes to me, and I have two options. He's like even going further by not only playing the story to the girls to win them over, but also to win the producers over to keep him in the show, because if he starts as a controversial and then actually deeply hurt guy, he's
Yeah,
gonna stay in. And I found that to be very interesting. Of like, we're in season 6 of this, and we already have a person coming in trying to construct their own narrative within the show. But I guess
really.
the cool thing about it as well is the producers obviously caught up on this and they still bite back in a sense.
Yeah, they
And it
still like expose it and kind of put it together in a way that his
fits them
behavior
again on top.
also like gets revealed gradually, and you kind of villainize him more because of the way he's presented at the start. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
totally true.
Should we move to Love Island?
Yes. Love Island. What a show. First of all,
Honestly, I actually think Love Island is super, super interesting. When it comes to like gender dynamics, I actually think it's the most fascinating of all the shows
mm,
because we get we get like all the sexism that Love is Blind has, but it's not as blunt. It's not like saying to you like you are overweight and you should be thin and sexy for me. It's more like how they interact with one another, because it's completely different. Love is Blind. They go outside in the world. The Love Island contestants, they're all inside of this villa for like what, 2 months, like 8 weeks or something like that. So they're all like incarcerated in this environment. And usually when you're also not in real life environments like this and enclosed in one house, you also tend to act in more extreme ways because you're not really living your normal life. So you don't
that's
act your
true.
normal. So I would say there's a lot of problems with Love Island and the contestants. So first, we obviously have the gaslighting of the crazy women. Like this is a stereotype that is obviously a result on the defiance of a conformed femininity surrounding emotional instability and irrationality. So the male islanders usually will use their partner's emotional reactions to their supposed infidelity as the reason for their, why they did that. So it would be like, when that moment that they go to like Casa Amor or something like that,
Yeah,
they get tempted. So they put like other women in it and then they act in a certain way. And then when they go confront them about it, like, oh, you did this, or you spoke with that. And they go, oh, why are you being such an ass? Why are you with this attitude? Like, stop being so negative. Like, no wonder I did this. So this kind of comes all from that. And this happens so, so many times.
that's
And
true.
it is also kind of provoked by the show itself, just by the way it is formatted, It's almost like that men are weak, so therefore let's put these all women
Yeah,
to go
that's
there.
true. That's very true. And I feel like in Love Island is also very specific because they're all there together. So like the men also form like a community of their own, which kind of emphasizes all of these behaviors because not only are you trying to stay in the game, but you're also trying to stay bros with the other men who are in the villa. And so oftentimes like the other men would like reinforce these behaviors on each other when like something like your girl is trying to like tell you you're like behaving in the wrong way, you don't want to come off weak in front of the other boys. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna gaslight her and you're gonna say she's the crazy one. Like, oh my God, guys, you won't believe what she's just done. Like, what a fucking bitch.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when it comes to sex, they definitely like group up together, and then I think they actually created a group. I forgot the
Yeah,
name,
it's like
but
the do
do
things
bits, do
do
bits
bit
society
society. Yeah,
could
it,
only come in if you had a sexual encounter with one of the female
yeah,
contestants. And
exactly.
depending on the type of sexual encounter, you will move in the hierarchy.
Like different levels. So like the kiss is like the lowest, and then full penetration sex is like the highest one, which is just so disgusting.
It's
And
disgusting. It's so weird to me as well, like how Wait, why? Like, this is so, oh my God. I was like, I cannot believe this is actually happening. But it's like one of those things that the show did not do it. It was the contestants themselves.
Yeah, and it
But when,
carries through for like different seasons. It kind of became a thing.
yeah, and to me, that's so crazy. And what I find very interesting on that is how they will evaluate their own masculinity
Yeah,
based on their sexual performances with other women. So the way they are validated is by other men. So it's kind of like
yeah,
this
exactly.
animalistic man pack, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Which,
like the bros together. Like they're bragging,
yeah,
like, yeah, I made out with this girl. I showed her my penis. And then like they just completely disregard the girls and whether they want that or not. So they completely disregard the whole purpose of the show and the aspect of like coupling up. Or often they would even like mess up their relationship because they would do something against the girl just to
be
appear good
accepted by
in
the
front of
guys.
the boys and be accepted by the guy, which is
Exactly.
wild.
Yeah, and I think, the women suffer a lot from these actions. And for example, even with sex, for example, like they are way more slut shamed for doing the exact same actions or having the exact same amount of sexual partners as the men have. And they are often used in that sense. And I think the reason that you end up being so objectified is because the way a man evaluates his own masculinity is dependent on the women. So even like that thing we said in another episode, it's kind of joking but kind of true. Men need women more than women do men because men literally evaluate their own masculinity depending on their sexuality with women. So if you don't have a woman to have sex with, you are nothing.
Yeah.
And that means that in order for you to be masculine, a woman needs to be in the correspondent box. So we do suffer, and the women in the show suffer consequently of all these sexism and all these misogynistic remarks, because if they are not put in that box, the men can never be a man. And that's just insane. But
I
also,
know. But it's
I
also so true. Like, it's very true. Women are very self-sustainable. And then I think that's also why there are very different dynamics in like the men groups and female groups because the men would work together to achieve their goal, which is to get the woman most of the time. And they would, create this, as you said, this club. So, create this recognition system for men to kind of aim for that goal, which is to get the woman to have sex with them. Whereas women work in a different way because they're trying to get the men. And in order to do that, they would go against each other because they view themselves as competition.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
it's very different, like same gender, like group dynamics, because the women, in a sense, it makes them feel as like the prize. They're like, they're like
mhm.
they're what's being like competed for in a sense. So they basically, the other women are different prizes. So they're competition to you because they may be picked instead of you,
Yeah,
whereas the men are the ones who are hunting to get the woman in a sense. So if they work
yeah.
collectively, they can plan, oh, like I'm gonna get this woman and you're gonna get this woman and everything is gonna work out because we're both gonna have sex in the end. So we both achieve our goal.
Yeah, and it's a very like primitive way
I
of living your
know,
life, isn't it? But
literally.
I think it's through the extreme that we really see it in him. It is a social experiment after all, but it's through these extremes that we really see how we as people really act and relate to one another in real life. So while it is way more masked when you go on a dating app date, it's exactly what's happening in Love Island, though. And I think that's
Yeah,
why I find it so fascinating. Another cool thing that I got to see is when women kind of act as men act. So they kind of act in a more masculine way,
yeah,
and they end up being more discriminated and even ostracized by the rest. It's like another case of double standard, but I think it goes a bit beyond that. It's more like why they had this type of reaction, because they are actually breaking the gender order that Love
yeah,
Island
exactly. They're breaking
lives
the
by.
code.
So because they self-identify as females, but then they act and perform as men or with
Men,
a
yeah.
more masculine behavior, because they're like, I'm gonna try and get this guy for my ulterior gain, that is to win the money in the fucking end. In this way, they're kind of blurring a bit the gender expectations for both women and men and transgress from one side to another as a performance, which then preoccupies men because then again, if women can do the same as me, who am I anymore?
Honestly, I swear dating apps are like such a good social observation points in a sense. Like
Yes.
you
It is so fascinating. Like these people, I mean, I feel so sorry for all of them, especially in Love Island, because they are not taken care at all. And a lot of them suffer from like mental health issues. And I think two people also committed suicide after the show because of the show. And it
yeah.
is very bad, the conditions they are put in. And yet the show keeps getting more and more and more popularity.
Yeah, I think
And
also what's very particular about it in that aspect is that it's basically live. So like the audience actually has an impact on the show because
mhm.
the other shows that we're talking about, they're passive, like the viewer is passive, you don't vote, you don't do anything. Whereas in Love Island, the viewer is the one who makes the decisions in the end. So you constantly feel you're being watched. It's also a very different format because the episodes come out every single day, I think. So it's so much more intense, and you kind of, as a viewer, get attached to the story so much more because you follow these people's life every single day. And so you feel you actually have an impact on it because you're the one who's making a decision based on that. And so those people in the villa, they sort of also feel they're just pawns for the viewers in a sense because ultimately they're the ones who are going to choose.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true. Like they can vote, they can like react. I think Love Island in the beginning was mostly a huge thing on Twitter initially, and they even started making changes because of people complaining online about I want to see this, I want to see that,
Yeah,
and they would
exactly.
include those challenges or those specific things that people are demanding for.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
now they even like pre-select the first couples. So when like the first coupling happens at the very, very, very beginning of the show, I think right now some of the couples are chosen by the viewers pre-show before anything airs. And I don't know, it's just a bit wild.
If you think about it, it's so ominous to us, right? These reality shows
Exactly.
and joke about it. But if you think about it, the experience of being in Love Island today, it's so similar to a Black Mirror episode.
Literally, it's like the big brother, in a sense. It's so creepy. You're just your life is being conditioned by like the people who are viewing it and you're constantly being watched. And obviously we also know that like these shows are heavily edited in the way that they're produced. And obviously the producers are also playing a very important part in creating a certain narrative. And so oftentimes the contestants in all of these shows feel very misrepresented because of the way their stories were cut and put together because they obviously are there to create shock value and they are there to create a certain type of narrative which is not necessarily accurate to reality.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be. And even though, and we know, the thing is like we are not that delusional. I think everyone who enjoys watching reality TV, we all know that it's actually not true. It is
Yes.
a played act and sometimes even scripted to us. And yet we still want to watch it. Like it doesn't matter to the audience, the mass audience, if the things are entirely real, unless they are like enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that's also the scary thing that we find this type of behavior and even actions towards the people and even the social experiment itself to be entertaining and to broadcast as entertainment to be good. And it's not, it is quite troubling. I feel even though we have more people complaining about it today, the show keeps growing on viewership and it keeps getting more and more shows and people keep on tuning in.
Yeah.
What are we as an active audience actually doing to stop this type of behavior? Do we actually enjoy it? Do we actually like to talk bad about it? Because that's also another thing. Do we enjoy to be able to talk bad about it? Do we actually want change? Or do we, because otherwise we would stop having entertainment?
Yeah, exactly. No, obviously the viewers are a big part of the problem and like myself, included as well, because what's entertaining is the drama. It is the shock value and it is all the bad things happening that, make you feel like, wow, I'm interested in this now. Obviously, if you just had like happy relationships and those people, coming out of it like super successful and in love, there would be like no point of watching it because you are watching it for the failures and for the shock and the plot twists and all of that. That's why I don't know. I think like the whole idea of these shows is kind of sinister from the
It
start.
is quite sinister. And we become more and more used to it. And I think with this active participation from the audience when it comes to Love Island becomes even more dystopian of like you can select couples, you can select this and that. Some people even said that Love Island results as a gigantic ad because you can even go to the app and choose and see all the outfits and buy this look and buy that look. And it's
Are you
all
serious? I didn't even know that.
yeah, yeah. So you can do like all the voting process and the stuff, and you can actually, because they're all dressed by specific brands. Right now is Pretty Little Things, for example, for Love Island. You can actually go and buy the look specifically from the Love Island that you see on the episodes. So it is very dystopian. And then it's we are not like blind to it, but it's all because we're all kind of craving love and relationships, even just watching them unfold. Like we're just so
Yeah,
desperate for it, I would say. Even if you are in a relationship because it might not going very well, because it's a bit loveless, we just crave those love stories all the time. And the more drama, the better, I guess, for us. But then ends up being very emotionally damaging to the contestants. And I don't think none of them fully realizes this until they actually participate in the show because they think, oh, I'm going to get famous or even more famous because some of them are already famous on Instagram and they're like models or whatever. But it's like, oh, I'm going to get even extra following and more stuff from this. I'll get more business opportunities of like cooperations with brands. But I don't think they realize the full impacts of what it is to be in a show of this kind. And no matter how many complaints we make, the show keeps getting views. And
yeah,
I don't know, perhaps the most strong thing you can do is actually to turn off the channel
that's true.
instead. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm being extremely hypocritical because here I am on my own podcast talking about it and do nothing with it in the end. But,
I
it's just
uh,
food for thought.
that's true. Speaking of that emotional aspect, I think the only show that actually does it good and cares for it, like the mental side of the contestants and actually tries to change their perspective on life and dating is Too Hot to Handle, like very bizarrely, which is such a like the whole
Too
format
Hot to
is
Handle
so
is the
bizarre.
best show ever.
And like it's all done in this like, super ironic format with the host being the massive cone, talking to people with like a very funny and sarcastic narrator. And the whole show is about people just trying not to have sex and fuck around with all the other hot people in the house. But what the show does really well actually is teaching these people how to form like more meaningful connections and having these workshops with specialists and kind of allowing them to express themselves one-on-one within couples, but also within like, only women or only men in like a safe space and really trying to channel the underlying issues that are preventing them from forming meaningful relationships. And like it really does seem to work. Obviously, it's also edited as every show, but I really do think at least it aims to promote more positive behaviors in contrast to the other shows that seem to perpetuate the negative in a sense. And it's like the only show that takes this playful and entertaining format with shock value because you're just waiting if those people are gonna, be sent to a private room and are they gonna fuck or not? Are they gonna lose all the
Yeah.
money? The drama is still there, but underlyingly, you can see these people start, turning a page and really reflecting, oh, like, I really shouldn't have done that because we've lost the money. And like the money symbolizes, the meaningful things you kind of lost. And it's a tangible element that allows you to see that, yeah, maybe you didn't need to fuck that person in that second just to be with them and form a connection with them. I really love it. It's such a good
Yeah.
show.
Too Hot to Handle is probably one of the best. Like it can never be perfect, of course, because it's still a reality TV. But I think it's one of the best for all the reasons you just point out. I think it's actually quite genius because it still brought it's just hot people competing. It still brought drama. It still brought conflict, but it's all surrounded in a way that it's definitely not problematic. Even the fact that they're all pretty much sex addicts
Yeah.
and that actually puts men and women equally straight on. I watching the show, I never saw a woman get slut shamed, which is extremely ironic because they're all like sex driven, and I think that makes even more sense because they all see themselves as equal. We all love sex. We all love to have sex just for sex
Yeah,
sake.
we're all hot, we're all players, we're all here to get the same thing.
And I think it actually did a much better job than Love is Blind, for instance, on going beyond appearances and actually find meaningful connections because it's also not focused solely on coupling. So if you do not have a partner, you can still win the show
Yeah,
because it's really
exactly.
about creating those. So friendship is actually put it side to side
With a
with one.
relationship, yeah.
And I think that's really, really great because we had great contestants that unfortunately never got to couple up with anyone, but they still won at the end of the show with everybody else.
Yeah, because of
And
their personal development and how they responded to the entire group and how they treated the other contestants, which is really important.
exactly, exactly. And that thing of the personal development is actually what makes you win the show. And that's what they're mostly worried about the contestants to learn. To How to Handle Brazil Edition Season 1 will forever be in my heart. When I saw those womanizers, child men, people open up their feelings
I
to one
know.
another, grow up, one of them being like, do never do this to a girl ever again. And I'm like, you guys actually fucking grew in this show. And I am
No.
here.
I'm
I am
always
so
so proud.
invested. I felt such a proud mom. I'm like, these rowdy kids grew up so much in front of my eyes. And the fact that we actually have specialists accompanying them throughout actually really helps. And we also don't have these hacks gender divisions as in Love Island. Usually, of course, men and women tend to talk more with one another, but we don't have those packs. We had very great friendships between men and women as well within the show. And the people who left in the middle of the show were people who were just literally not willing to create those connections. And you're not fit for the show, so you have to go because that's what the premise is about. And also the fact that if they did some toxic behavior or something that was wrong, they were actually called out by the group and punished by the narrator show itself.
Yeah.
And then in the end, the money is divided by everyone. So it's not even just one couple taking it all, kind of like Love Island, for example. So there is money as the main motivator, but it's divided by everyone. So everyone kind of packs together to actually like, let's actually make this work
Yeah,
instead of just super couple driven. And then they end up actually creating connections between. It's such a good show. Like, you guys, this is how you do it. You
I
can only improve
know.
here. Look, everyone, Love Island, Love is Blind, and many others. Look for Too Hot to Handle and learn.
I know. It's really a good example, to be honest. So,
Yeah, it's all about the power dynamics, right?
yeah.
So, for example, this very famous, I think it is a bit declining, but like The Bachelor is like one of the most famous
Mm.
dating shows ever, which is extremely sexist by just having this one man and a bunch of women fighting for him. And what happened is that they act because of like all the controversies that they got from like more modern audiences, they actually started a spin-off called The Bachelorette, which is basically the woman who is the last cookie of like the package or whatever. And but the problem with how that was a failure because they say, oh, the woman has a choice, therefore feminist, therefore woohoo. No, no, no. What happens is that like first the way that they represent those women as like the bachelorettes, while in the Bachelor they're these I won't say godlike, but like very desirable men, like super successful, like rich or whatever. And the bachelorettes were always, always, always ex-contestants of The Bachelor. So they were rejected women on the show.
That's so bad. What the fuck?
So what does that say to an audience that this poor woman now needs to be picked up by someone else, and you have all these guys that gonna go and save her from being, I don't know, single, I guess. And that's kind of what passes on off the show. And then on a later season, they actually, because they want to empower female friendship, they put two bachelorettes as the protagonists in a sense. So instead of having one and having all the guys going for one, you have two, which just made everything worse because now the guys have a choice that women actually never had on The Bachelor. Now the guys can choose and reject one of the our ideal women like to marry, which is again insane. So the power dynamics was actually never switched as you thought it would because
Yeah.
of how the show represented the women in the first place and how with all these like different little changes,
Am
it
I
was just a
surprised? No.
no. And something that I really found that I just want to say is that the way I think in all of the shows, this Bachelor, the Love Island, the Love is Blind, is also the emotional manipulation of women and how they are constantly manipulated emotionally, also based on the gender stereotype that women are more emotional. So they just make it even reinforce it more by creating those exaggerated reactions from them. And this happens a lot in Love Island. And it happens a little bit on Love is Blind too, which is very, very fucked up because not only reinforcing a kind of false stereotype. I'm sorry, guys, if you're not able to cry, that ain't my fault. Like
Yeah.
I will express my emotions. But still, it also like puts women in a very stressful situations because they make them cry and get these emotional reactions on purpose when it's, for example, unnecessary. For example, in Love Island, there was this incident again with the Casa Amor thing where they made the girl who stayed, they gave her a clip of her partner who was there, but edited in a way that made him like he was cheating on her, but that was actually not true. He was not, and they just made that
Oh
for
my
her to be
God.
stressed and doubt about the guy, which would come up as her doubting on his infidelity and then him being like, you're crazy. So they created this whole thing for her to be like, overly emotional about it and then call her crazy in the end for not being true.
What the fuck?
That's super fucked up. And when I saw that, almost immediately after, I was looking into The Bachelor, and I have to pull up this quote because this is what the producer said, the direct quote. He said, "It is a lot of fun to watch girls cry. Never underestimate the value of that."
What the fuck? Excuse me.
And I was like, this is why we keep putting
Wow.
these images as the forefront of so many of the dating shows. It is the woman having a fucking mental breakdown in front of the camera, and that is what's worth watching. I was so mad. I was so mad when I read that. Ugh.
That's insane. That makes me so angry. Wow.
And if you think about it, it's like what's underlining most of the sexism, right? And it's all coming down of it's so enjoyable to see a woman suffer.
No, that's very true. I mean, yeah, as we said, all of these shows have the shock value, and how the shock value is made is to perpetuate certain stereotypical roles and kind of tear out the emotions out of people as best as you can. And usually that's sadly done at the expense of women. And yeah, as I said, the only good show that does not do that is Too Hot to Handle.
Exactly. In a world of The Bachelor, Love Island, and the atrocious Love is Blind, be a too hot to handle.
Be too
That
hot
is
to handle and slay and express your emotions.
exactly. Get like honestly, out of all these shows, watch Too Hot to Handle. Like great Brazil season one, highly recommend.
Yes, Brazil, top choice. And I think with that, we can leave you think about that.
Yeah.
Go space out, watch some trash TV now, and let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, like let us know what you think about all of these people coupling up together, trying not to have sex together, and yeah.
Yeah, have fun, stay safe. And I
Use condoms.
use
Fuck the
condom.
pill. Use condoms.
Exactly. Slay.
All right. We'll talk to
Bye.
you very soon. Bye.
Bye.